Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track. It's America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. Today was the French GP, and it was interesting. Rob, tell everyone what to expect on today's episode.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a break from the norm here, Brian. We normally talk about this when we get to the race review. Do you think there's any way we can just walk out into the empty field and do a primal scream about how angry we are about Ferrari right now and just get all of that out of the way now and then just review the race away from Ferrari anger? Or do you think we can't get away from it even if we talk about it now?
Can't get away from it. I actually was going to, as we love to do sounds on here, I was going to have the Charles no, but I can't. I can't do that to the man who is just my least favorite driver on the grid is Lance Stroll. And if Lance Stroll had a similar thing happen and he screamed like that just out of pure frustration, I still wouldn't do that to Lance Stroll. So I can't do it to a guy I would love to just do that. But I think unfortunately it's got to be peppered throughout the entire race.
Because I was angrier than a swarm of wasps that had just graduated from Angry University with a diploma in Angry Studies, because I was just like, how can Ferrari do this again? But okay, fine.
And even if you're not a Ferrari fan, and I'm not a particularly huge Ferrari fan, I do have a Ferrari hat and I do like Charles, but I'm not like, I'm not a card-carrying member of the Tifosi. It annoys the crap out of me. And I almost used a bad word there. And I used the first ever bad word from this year podcast on Twitter today because I'd had enough, and I apologize to anybody whom that might have offended. That was me. I am the Twittern. And I didn't know what else to do. I had already destroyed half of the room I was watching the event in. And I'm like,
Okay, so we're 2 minutes in, and we're not going to have a Ferrari rant and then cleanse ourselves. We're going to just have to roll with the punches as we get into the race review. Okay, so good. We will do news and social. Pretty busy week actually this week. Then we will talk about the sacre bleu, the French GP. At least we're not going there next year. And then we will.
It doesn't look like it. But.
It doesn't look like it. Then we will have our guest Ben on DRS, and we will end up with a Hungary preview because we are back to back this week. So,
actually, and one other quick note.
Oh yeah.
Pit Lane Paul's report is not to be missed. It is not long, but he is with us, and so we look forward to that conversation as well. But sorry, back to you, sir.
That's okay. Let's jump into news and social now. I wrote a tweet this week that was something along the lines of Twitter can sometimes basically be a cesspit of humanity. There's some real nasty people that can hang out in Twitter, and you have to try to keep away from the toxic stuff. But actually, there was also a reminder this week about how it can be an awesome place as well. So there is a Twitter user that goes by the handle of Centurion Lewis, big Lewis Hamilton fan, who is not in a good way. Shared the news that they're battling advanced stages of cancer. And essentially the community just kind of just rallied round and was kind of like, we've got to get, Mercedes and Lewis, we've got to get their attention on this. So it just snowballed. People are kind of tagging Lewis and Mercedes and everything. And then it literally took a matter of hours maybe.
Yeah, half a day tops.
Half a day tops before Mercedes to respond and say, where are you in the UK? We'll basically lay on transport to get you to the Brackley Mercedes facility and bring you along. And just awesome. I just love it when Twitter can do something like that in a positive way.
I would love for it not to need someone to be in such bad shape battling cancer, but I loved the number of Max fans who came out and said, regardless of who we may cheer for, we got your back, man. And so I saw it as well, and I wish him nothing but the best, and I hope the trip is amazing. There's no way to shift gears from that, but we're going to move on to what was a big trend this week as well, the George Russell is that type of guy trend. And the best part was George found it about a day into it. And it was early in the week, and it was great. It was the George Russell, the type of guy to ask the waiter, what's the damage, before they hand him the check. George Russell's the type of guy to say, I'm just going to squeeze right by you and trying to get through a crowd. I saw one that said something to the effect of, George Russell's the type of guy to slap his leg as he gets out of the chair. And then George found him, and he loved him. He seemed to really enjoy him.
So, and I love the fact that you found it funny, because a lot of the things that they were throwing on the end of this George Russell is the type of guy too is a whole bunch of stereotypical yet painfully accurate Britishisms. So, like that whole kind of like slapping your legs and saying "right then" before you get up, like the need to announce it to a room that you're getting up and going somewhere is like a painful Britishism. I've done it. The whole squeezing past someone, despite the fact they might be blocking your way and kind of saying "excuse me, can I just squeeze through?" or room for a little one or anything like that. It's just and it just snowballed from there. You had all those, and it just kept going and going. And like you say, he jumped in on the back of it in the end. I think he kind of what was his tweet? How am I the kind of guy that has only just discovered this?
Yeah, and so I didn't realize some of those were Britishisms. They're things I do as well, so I just kind of assumed they were. It was almost like a mix of Britishisms and dad jokes combined.
Yeah, you're right.
Team Lando got in on it after quali. It was great. They sent one out that said, George is the type of guy to qualify after Lando. And I thought that was funny because it was exactly this. And it wasn't a meme thing. Some people were like, oh, they're really, taking the out of him. No, it was funny. And it was in alignment. But I have to highlight the best one. And it just slayed me. And I sent it out on Twitter. And they were in talking to the grid before the weekend. And they went around. And Alex had a good one because, Alex and George are friends. So he's like, basically, George is the kind of guy. He did this live to camera. George is the type of guy who ends up with no shirt on at the airport security screening. And I thought that was great. But then Valtteri. Oh my Valtteri. God. Oh, it was so perfect. And it was in such quiet, deadpan finish type delivery. George Russell is the type of guy who overtakes in damp conditions at the end of the main straight at Imola. And then there was Ted Kravitz, I think, who was interviewing me, said, and then blames the other guy. And Valtteri goes and blames the other guy. And so it was just so beautiful and perfect. For me, that was the capstone of perfection onto the George Russell's the type of guy meme. I don't know.
No, I loved it. I like it when something like that snowballs, and I like it even more when the person who's the target of it takes it well and joins in on it, and then when all of his peers like ride in on it as well. It was just one of those memes that if you were the sort of person that tries to start one off, that's how you envisage it ending, that the target of the meme adopts it, and so do all of his peers. So, well played whoever kind of kicked that thing off. Then we had ESPN F1 shared a video of Kimi feeding some water to a dog that had been left in a car in boiling hot heat, but the window was slightly cracked open so he could kind of get his arm through the window and feed this little dog the drink.
Yes, you will have the drink. So actually, I think that was a little over a week ago, from being honest, because I saw it before ESPN picked up on it, but it was brilliant. And it looked like he'd had a yogurt or gelato cup, and he'd poured it out and filled it with water.
Where's the sounds?
Well, you won't have the drink.
Oh,
but he will have the drink.
Could have made a play on it. I mean, come on.
But you will have the drink, doggo? I don't know.
Something. I mean, I looked to you for the sounds, Brian, but...
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, if we really want to go backwards, we can do one of these... Russell's the type of guy who would blah, blah, blah. Anyway, yeah, I thought that was pretty good. I'll let you talk about the next one because this was up your alley, and then I have a couple I want to hit.
I just saw it on Twitter that there was Ocon was revealing the helmet he was going to wear and how it had actually been a contest to design it. I didn't even realize there was a contest, and whatever, someone won it, it was made. It was actually the one that didn't win it that people had absolutely piled in on. I can't even describe it. We'll just put it up on like the image on like Twitter or Instagram or something. But if you can go to I don't even know where it is actually. I mean, Bell helmets is the design thing, but it's essentially a helmet that is designed to look like Ocon wearing a cap. So it's actually his face printed on the outside of the helmet, grinning like an idiot, to be honest, but wearing his blue Alpine cap. And it's just hilarious. I just so wish they'd done that because that would have looked hilarious from the outside of the car.
It would have been perfect.
Because it would have just looked like he was cruising around wearing his cap.
As much as we loved Lando with the basketball in Miami, that would have been even better. That would have been just top notch.
It would have been chef's kiss.
Yes, it would. It would. A couple great things to watch on the interwebs, and we already talked a little bit about broad kind of social media items, but McLaren had a couple videos that came out within about a week's span. The first one was the Whisper Challenge, which thankfully I knew what this one was, as opposed to some of the other ones they launch into without explaining. It was okay. It was fun. Like, it felt like Daniel and Lando were actually kind of enjoying the challenge, but then they made crepes this week, and it's great. Like, it is really funny. And I got to be honest, as much as I've been down on their chemistry and as much as Daniel is, embattled, this one felt like the one where they were having fun. This one felt like the one where the team's coming together. I love it when the plan comes together. The A team is coming out. If anyone is ready, I'm ready to pull onto the Here Comes McLaren bandwagon, because it based pretty much solely on the social media. But obviously Lando qualified fifth and then finished well. But outside of that, it was fun to watch. 6 minutes. Check it out. The McLaren Crepe Challenge. There was a cool little FP1 video of Charles and Lando waving at each other as practice started. But then it's important to note, speaking of YouTube, the Dirty Side YouTube was back up and alive after an initial run when we first started, and then it went dark. It is back. So if you ever want to listen to the podcast and YouTube is easier for you, check it out. So we'll put the podcasts out there each week. It won't necessarily have video of us, but it'll have conversations and video pieces that kind of help out along the way. So it's good if you're at work and you have your earbud in, you can listen along via YouTube as well.
Yeah. You say it may not have video of us.
It won't.
I'm not skilled enough to be able to edit the video, Brian, so it 100% won't have video of us.
Correct.
But that's cool. And then talking about kind of YouTube and our appearances in media, we were both left a little stunned on, I think it was Thursday morning, maybe Friday. I don't know. Time is passing all over the place this week. One of our listeners, Insane Lee, that we actually had on 100 Seconds of DRS, in fact, one of our first DRS guests, in fact.
Yeah.
He sent us an article from a newspaper in the UK. It goes by the name of the Daily Express, which I've heard of many a time, and sends us this quote, which he's like, I don't know if you saw this quote. And I kind of looked at it through bleary-eyed. I'd just woken up. I was looking at it. I was like, okay, that seems like a quote from our show, whatever. And then I kind of looked at it properly and opened the link. And it's an article on their website. Ex-F1 driver has radical ideas about punishment for cost cap. I'm like, well, that's what Jack was talking to us about last week. So I was scrolling down this article, and the whole article is talking about stuff that we talked to him about. I'm like, okay, that's fair enough. I mean, I doubt we're the only person that he's spoken to about that. And then you scroll down to the last paragraph of the article, direct quote in quotation marks, followed by the phrase, Jacques Villeneuve was talking to the Dirty Side of the Track podcast with a hyperlink to our episode. I mean, if talking to him himself, Jacques Villeneuve, hadn't been the most surreal thing ever, then this got very, very close, to be honest, Brian. It was just nuts.
It was.
This is Jacques Villeneuve, and you're listening to the Dirty Side of the Track.
Any chance to get that back in there. But yeah, it was, I can't believe, we were quoted. So to the author, if you're out there and ever want to collab on any journalistic efforts, let us know. We are terrible, but we're always here. And the last thing before we get into the French Grand Prix is just a story from my life. I was out at a bar on Friday with some friends. A lot of my friends had birthdays, and so we did sort of a joint birthday drinks. And a few of their wives were there, and one of the kids, and we were outside having a great time. And I come out of the washroom, and I come walking down the patio halfway into the evening, and I might have been wearing a Dirty Side of the Track t-shirt. And as I come up back onto the patio area, there's this table of 4, 2 men, 2 women, maybe slightly younger than I am, and one of the women looks at me and yells, "Dirty Side of the Track!" And now normally I'm pretty good at responding to things like this. I've actually gotten in trouble because I sometimes can say things that are, not bad, but I can push boundaries and be funny and whatever. I completely had a brain fart. I don't know what happened. She was a nice looking lady, so if you're a listener, kudos to you, but I screwed up and I go, yeah, America's leading Formula 1 podcast, just walked away and sat down. I go, that was dumb. Why didn't I actually talk to her? And so, or the table, or her partner, or the other woman, I didn't say anything to anybody. I just walked away.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
The picture you sent me when you're walking home, looking like you've been enjoying yourself on a couple of liquid refreshments.
Yes.
How close to that picture were you when you tried to respond to this person? Where on the scale of numbers of beers were you?
I was pretty early in. I was probably only 3 beers in when that happened, which may be why my brain didn't work, as it hadn't had the proper alcoholic lubrication. But anyway, so if you're a listener, ma'am, sorry I didn't engage you more in conversation and just ran away confused. But anyway, so today was the French Grand Prix. Let's talk a little bit about the practice that kind of led up to it. It was interesting. Mercedes got the time with their young driver in Nick de Vries on FP1 for Lewis, took ninth. We learned for sure that Sainz would have at least a 10-spot grid penalty, which obviously became 20.
Why does that happen? Why is there this kind of
parts.
like... No, but why does it... Is there some kind of rule that you can't announce it all at one go? Because it was like, well, they've announced they're going to replace these parts, so there's a 10-place penalty coming. We're pretty sure that what they're going to do in FP2 or whenever it was is they'll announce that they're going to take the other parts and take the next 10. I'm like, is that like by design? Because if you know it's going to happen, why don't you just go, yeah, we got to replace all this crap because it's all broken?
I think you're waiting to see if they needed to, or hear me out. It was a strategic move by Ferrari. That made no sense.
No, I'm not ready for the anger yet. Let's not go there. I got to be honest, me and you were very, very poor at writing any notes on this, and I watched FP2 and FP3. Not a lot really happened. Even in FP3, when I thought I was holding back to think, well, with Sainz with a penalty now, do I keep him in my fantasy team?
Oh, don't talk about fantasy either. I mean, this is just a bad week.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you beat me by a couple of points. I think it was like, but anyway, we'll come into that later. But I was like really looking for some kind of indications, but no one really seemed to give, I don't know, nothing seemed to happen in free practice 3. It was kind of a little bit of trading of times at the front to kind of give you the indication that it was probably going to be a Ferrari pole, maybe. And then everything else was just kind of like, meh.
Well, I would say Mercedes looked quick and looked like a threat. And then Checo looked lost. And what was curious is then in quali, let's just move right there. We'll get into the story, but Mercedes looked slower, and Checo was better. And so it was like again, I guess don't put as much stock as you might expect into the practices. And so Q1 quali, Red Bull definitely fast in a straight line. Charles looking fast. K-Mag also was taking the engine penalty. So the question is, and at the beginning they said maybe he'll do a lap, right? Just so he does his minimum and can race. He actually was out there in Q1 and Q2 going for it. And
that's what I found really bizarre. It was like, I mean, I kind of get it. As I thought about it, they're going, oh, yeah, he'll probably just trundle around, won't even register a lap, come back into the pits, and then he's satisfied the minimum needed of a single lap in quali. And he's going to start from the back anyway, so let's save wear and tear on the engine. Yeah, it makes sense. And like you say, he comes out and drops like a quality lap and puts him up in like 6th or whatever it was in Q1. I'm like, okay, but I guess, I mean, does it? It prevents other teams from getting further into the later stages, right? I guess. You can look at it that way.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Haas were looking quite feisty, and like Mick comes round right on the line and kind of takes 3/10 off and like slams it into the top 10. Yeah, baby. And then we get good old track limits raising their head again because I don't know. He was the width of a pubic hair over the white line, and they delete. The one that annoys me about this, right, is that it's the inside corner. It's not the outside. It's not like slingshotting outside and taking advantage of going off the track that way. It's about cutting the corner. But they've actually got a bollard, it looked like, on that inside corner to prevent you from cutting the corner too much. So I'm like, well,
and
who cares?
A curb, and then the bollard but next to it. Yeah.
If you're inside that bollard, why you worry? And if the bollard isn't in the right place to adjudicate track limits, move the bollard. It's like,
well, the bollard's that's useless. It's basically they're just using the white line. There's no point to having that thing there because if they're enforcing track limits, you don't need it. It's not useful.
And I found some stats somewhere that Schumacher probably made it wouldn't even been measured in the tenths. It would have been measured in the thousandths. The amount of time that he would have saved by being that inch over the white line, and he was 3/10 quicker in that lap. So I get it, right? There's rules. You've got to observe track limits, but I don't get the inside corner one as much when it's not really that quicker, and you've got the bollard to enforce the real huge corner cut. Just let them do it as long as they don't hit the bollard. If they hit the bollard, track deleted. Lap deleted. But anyway.
Well, if they hit it, you'll notice, and then you don't have to watch as carefully. I mean, I don't know. So I had Mick on my fantasy team. I made a last-second hungover decision to put in Mick instead of K-Mag at the bottom of my dollar amount roster. So when that happened and he was removed, I said, that's perfect. However, I also have Albon, so then he was through to Q2 because of that. So he went out of the elimination zone and moved up. But we lost Pierre, Lance, Zhou Guanyu, Mick, and Nikki Latifi. Pierre, by the way, with a weekend to forget, if I'm being completely honest. We'll talk more about Pierre in a second. The pictures of his parents in the back of the garage, it was rough. There were a few times they cut to him, and I don't think the parents knew they were on TV, and they were like, damn it.
And then we got through to Q2, and Carlo, despite the fact that he was taking the grid penalty, it was almost like he just wanted to do the whole, well, I'll show you anyway thing, and just absolutely obliterated everybody. 9/10 faster than anybody out there. It was just like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Carlo's having a really weird season where he's got these flashes of being like absolute genius behind the wheel, and then he can go and get stuck in traffic for...
Or end up in the gravel 3 races in a row. I don't understand it. Like you said, he can take pole, he can win a race now. He can put in this lap that is just perfection, and then it'd be holding up his own teammate in the same car.
Yeah.
It's just, and like you said, Mercedes was slower than expected. We lost Danny Rick, Esteban, Valtteri, Seb, and Alex in Q2. And then Q3, this was great. So the slingshot came out, and I loved it. The slipstream, that was great. It was fun to watch. I don't know if it really did a lot, maybe a little bit, but I think he had it anyway.
I think he had pole anyway, but it was just, I mean, for all the things that Ferrari can't get right and the strategy that they can't get right, which we will come on to as we get angry later, but this was just judged beautifully twice. Carlo knew exactly where he needed to be, gave Charles the maximum tow down the straight that he could, and then although actually on the second time that he did it, the camera angle was a little bit deceptive, and I thought that Carlo wasn't going to get out of the way in time and was going to like be completely holding him up, but then he pulled out, and so they just played it perfectly. Got pole, fantastic, and then in came the Mercs, and it's like, oh, okay, so here we go, it's Ferraris, Red Bull, in come the Mercs, it's all good, and then Lando just came barreling round the corner.
Love it.
But we both noticed exactly the same problem with the
happened twice this weekend, and I don't understand. Again, maybe this is because I'm so riled up about what happened with Ferrari and such a bad taste in my mouth, even though I enjoyed the race. It was chaos. So McLaren had a picture of Lando with someone pressing bread on the sides of his face, and they put little Mercedes emblems on each piece of bread, and they wrote a Mercedes sandwich. No. If you take peanut butter and jelly and put it on bread, it's not a bread sandwich. It's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The thing in the middle, the meat or the entree, chicken salad, whatever, tuna, turkey, ham, bologna, I don't care, cheese. That's what the sandwich is called. That would be a McLaren sandwich if there's a Mercedes on each side, and Mercedes is the bread. You cannot call it a Mercedes sandwich. And I recognize it's an easy mistake to make, but then it was made again in a different situation today on race day, and I was already angry, so it just...
I just think it set the tone for the entire weekend. I was angry that they could misname a sandwich so badly, and that just kind of set me off on the wrong foot for everything that was going to come. So
before we close quali, we'll close this episode, but quali for the year, I do have a couple stats before we get into the race that I want to hit quickly, and let's kind of understand a bit. Zap Stats qualifying edition through the first 12 races. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about 12 races of qualifying and some of the head-to-head... Yeah,
sorry,
you like that?
One second before... Right, we've got one more race until it's the break.
Yeah.
You couldn't have saved this up for qualifying edition at the break and just waited one more week. We've got some random...
Someone else will do it. Another podcast will take it. Okay. Someone else will publish it. I want to be cutting edge, baby.
We'll edit this bit out and pretend it never happened. I'm totally not doing that.
Okay. So just qualifying head-to-heads, and a lot of them are sort of commonsensical. That might make sense, like Max 9-3 over Checo, Charles 10-2 over Carlos. Interestingly, Mercedes, Hamilton, and Russell now 6-6. Lando 10-2 over Danny Rick. But here's one that I found interesting. If I'd asked you at this point, Alpine, who has the better qualifying? Fernando or Esteban, what would you have said if you're not looking at the stat that we have in our notes here?
Well, I know I just looked at the stats we had in the notes because I didn't realize you were going to ask me that. But I would have said Alonso because Alonso, in my head, is the better driver.
But would you say 8-4? That's a bigger gap than I would have anticipated. I feel like Esteban scores a lot more points, but anyway.
Yeah, but points are scored on a Sunday. I would have said 12-0.
So then, well then, Valtteri 9-3 on Zhou Guanyu. We have Seb 8-2 on Lance because he was out a couple races with COVID to start the year, if you remember, and Nico was in there. Alex 10-2 on Nicky Latifi. But then if I'd asked you, what do you think about Alpha Tauri? Because we had a listener, Paul M., in Detroit, send us a note, and he said Yuki seems to be really bringing it to Pierre. And we'd done some analysis a few races ago, and it was pretty even. What would you say now Alpha Tauri qualifying is at this point?
Do you want me to pretend I'm not looking at the notes?
All right, it's Pierre 8-4 over Yuki. I would have thought it was closer. I would actually have guessed it was closer to 6-6.
I would, because we've been sort of saying that Gasly doesn't seem to have been the driver this year that he was last year. So I would have thought it would have been closer to 6-6. But
I was surprised by that. And then the last one are the Haas boys, and I figured K-Mag would be ahead of Mick, especially at the beginning of the year. Just seemed to be blanking him, but it's 10-2. It's one of the extremes. I did not see that coming.
The veteran over the rookie-ish.
Yeah. Second year, man, but that's right. So then, last one, Ferrari. As a whole, we've talked about this as well. Number of poles at Ferrari. By far, we mentioned this when we did Vale's Tales on Schumacher. We've mentioned this earlier this year. Schumacher, 58 poles for Ferrari, by far the most, over double the second place man of Niki Lauda with 23. However, when the season was getting underway, we noticed that it was Felipe Massa at 15, Ascari at 13, and Seb at 12 in terms of all-time poles for Ferrari. With the pole position that Charles got on Saturday, that gave him 16, moved him into sole position of third place by himself ahead of Felipe Massa. That's pretty impressive. I'm sorry, to have third place all alone in all-time poles at Ferrari, and he's still young and hasn't been there that long, that's pretty darn good, if I'm being honest.
It is, but he's got to start converting Saturdays into Sundays a bit more, because who's going to really care when your pole stats are if you don't back it up on a Sunday? So
let's talk about
talking about the Sundays.
Yeah.
So first off, we had a glorious combination in the bar this morning, because we had one of our DRS guests, Ben, and another DRS guest and also contributor of the DRS music, my neighbor Jim, were both in the bar this morning. So it's kind of like DRS community. We actually had our strongest showing down there. We had 11 down there today, which was cool.
Did you sign some of the other people up to be on DRS? Do they listen?
We're trying. Ben brought a couple of friends across to along to the bar that they really seem into it. But so everything was good. We were getting excited. The start was good. Charles got away. Everything was looking awesome. We had the Haas boys looking racy and like jumping up a few places.
K-Mag especially quickly.
K-Mag
was up like seven spots in the first lap.
I was thinking, okay, Paul Ricard, I don't really like you, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here because things are looking racy right from the get-go. And then I think you sent me a note that was like, has this race gone into its lull from like the fourth lap or whatever it was? It was just, we just seem to we quickly settled into not a lot. It gets better later.
Much spicier, yeah.
Very quickly, later. We just kind of got into this, Max and Charles are going to do their dance at the front. Max is going to have straight line speed in Sector 2, which is going to get him really, really, really super close, and everyone's going to get excited that he's going to put a pass on. Then we're going to go into Sector 3 and then back into Sector 1, where the corners favour Ferrari, so Charles is going to pull away again. And then we're going to get into Sector 2, and Max is going to get super, super, super close, and everyone's going to get super excited on the commentary that it's all going to happen any minute. And it just didn't. But then because it didn't, the TV, again, I'm going to start getting angry already now. The people responsible for doing the TV direction couldn't decide, well, this is just the same that's happening. Let's just keep an eye on the front two. Let's say, I don't know, hey, intern over there, you keep an eye on that TV screen that is Max and Charles. And if anything happens, let us know, because there's a load of stuff going on in the midfield that we keep doing the little micro window within a window on the left-hand side on the infographic that kind of, you almost have to like walk up to the TV and put your eyeballs on the TV to be able to see what's going on. We missed every early overtake.
Rob, some of us aren't alcoholics in bars at 8 a.m. and sit at home on our 10-foot screens, and I can see it in that little box, but they still didn't show anything in it. And so here's a couple things that also happened at the start. McLaren was racing each other, right? So Checo went down and Lewis went up, and then it was Danny, Rick, and Lando racing each other, and it was amazing. I loved it. Stroll went up 5 places, so kudos to Lance. And then he got right behind Seb, and they were racing each other pretty hard. And I'm going to get to them at the end, because that needs a little more attention. Didn't get enough at the end of the race. we were debating how important and heavy DRS would be here. Not enough is what I think we learned. You couldn't pass. You could get close, and then effectively, like you said with Max, he was just constantly in Charles' rearview mirrors. And after a few laps, when I feel like we ran into a Paul Ricard lull.
It's not quite what you wrote, but we're keeping this pod clean.
I was already saucy. I mean, completely had nothing to drink, but a lot of F words. And so the largest gap on track, as I'm looking at the intervals, the largest gap was from second to third. So Max and Charles, or Charles and Max, I guess I should say, are motoring off, and they're right on each other's tail, right? Max right in his rearview mirrors. And then it was like a 6-second gap to Lewis, and that was twice as much as the gap anywhere else on the track.
Yeah.
Yet with all those close following, there were very few battles at the beginning. There were a few occasionally, and we'd only see them when they'd flip on the interval chart because we didn't see half of them occur in real time.
And then could have been a masterstroke to kind of get out of all the traffic and maybe look to do a one-stop like super early. Haas pulled the trigger on a very risky strategy, which
did not work.
Had we not had the safety car, it would have been interesting to see where those two had turned out. But so they go real early. They go 9 for K-Mag, 10 for Schumacher. They go to the hards, and that's it now. That's their one stop. They started on the mediums. They were going on to the hard. That was their one stop for the rest of the race.
Too early. It's too early. I'm sorry. I get it. I get what they tried to do. But if we're gonna put Ferrari behind the woodshed because they pitted Carlos 10 laps to go, we should also have a problem pitting someone 10 laps in. 9 laps for K-Mag. That's super early, and they weren't like on softs or anything. It's not like they went on soft tires to jump the start.
We'll never know because
we'll know. It was
the
a bad
safety car just completely destroyed their race day.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Although I hear, what's this? Just breaking news. Haas is still at the circuit. They're doing their 9th pit stop of the day.
So I've got to bring you up on this because I saw you send a tweet out about Mick's going in for his 5th pit stop, right? So I looked at the official results. Mick only did 2. He did a 2-stop, and the second was only forced because he had a collision. So why are you thinking that they're making way more pit stops than anybody else?
They're pitting so early. They had to have had a very aggressive 2-stop strategy. Okay. There was a second when it was they're still out there making these random pit stops that didn't work.
I just think your anger got in the way of your comedy gene.
I'm not an angry person. I'm a person I'm a lover, not a fighter. And today just riled me up and got me all.
Well, it did because you were getting quite angry in the comments. So it's kind of, we saw that, Sainz passes folk and another one that we don't see the details of. And I just written a note in there that Brian's a diva that demands constant action because you were getting upset at the lack of action.
I was getting boring.
Or the lack of action that we were actually seeing.
But then we saw action, and I will say this: we saw action not because of the racetrack, but because of things happening.
Yes.
Like the racetrack didn't cause a great race. An interesting race happened on a boring racetrack, is the way I would phrase it. And so Max came into the pits on lap 16, and at this point, Crofty is basically saying, "How soon will we see Charles come in? Because you can't let an undercut occur at this point. You have to react." And then Charles goes by. And then Charles goes by, and then something happened.
Oh, and it's just so frustrating because it's like I'm just getting angry thinking about it now. I'm kind of like I'm in full on Hulk mode. But he pits. You've got the track position. He's going to be doing an outlap where he's going to be warming his tyres up. So you can just copy him and box. And I don't think the undercut is going to be strong on this circuit because they have to spend 3 years coming out of the pit lane.
Right, they extended the pit lane too, by the way. It's 40. It was like over 30 seconds lost.
You have to go into Spain and come back into France. That's how long the pit lane is. But it's just like, so just pit straight away. Just copy him. He's blinked first. Copy him. Unless you screw up the pit stop, you'll be back out in front of him.
Exactly.
So... Or these tires can go on for a long time, so you extend the run really long, and then you're gonna maximize some fresh hards, which are like 5 to 10 laps fresher than Max's. But when
Carlos is your wingman,
Charles has already been moaning about kind of the tires. So you're like, well, don't leave him out on them. Don't put it in his hands.
And there was no second teammate because Carlos is coming through the field at this point. Yeah. There's no team game. You have to react to Max. And they went by twice, and at this point, I'm thinking, what are they doing? And then they cut to the car in the barrier, and I'm like, that can't be Charles. And it's Charles. And I'm like, no.
And then we get the whole internet conspiracy theory. So he mentioned his throttle on the radio when he was in the wall. Now, what they've said since... So at first point, everyone's going, oh, he had the problem with the throttle a few races ago. So did his throttle jam open again? You watch that when the rear twitches? That's not an open throttle. That's not rear tyres that are lighting up and he can't stop it. So... And then what they actually said was, if you listen to radio again, he couldn't... Because he didn't really hit the wall that hard.
He was trying to back out.
He was trying to back out. He was trying to put it into reverse, but he couldn't get the throttle. He couldn't select the throttle to be able to reverse back out again. So I do actually think this isn't... It's not Ferrari reliability issue again. I think it is just Charles just screwing it up, pushing a little bit too hard, and then I'll flip the blame back to Ferrari, pushing it too hard on tyres he shouldn't have still been out on.
Shouldn't have been out there. And then Nico Rosberg had a great point. I'm not a big Nico fan. I think he's... anyway, and so he had the point as well, maybe the wind got him, because there was some great work by Anthony Davidson showing the exact same approach the lap prior in the exact same place, no problems. And so the question is, what changed? And it's either additional tire degradation for newer fans. So when the tires are falling off a cliff, you can't stay out there forever. And so that might be it. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe he got on the throttle a little early, but it doesn't seem like a reliability problem. But what would then really, like, I'm sitting there just, and then, okay, so safety car, people come in, Carlos comes in, and had an unsafe release, which cost him a 5-second penalty. Forget the penalty. Ferrari screwed that up because there's someone who hits a button when everyone is clear, when the jackmen are away from the tires and it's all ready to go, and he gets a green light when there's no one coming. And the driver doesn't look in their tiny little fake BS side mirrors. They're ready to go. And when the light goes green on their pit stop board, they go full power and get out of there. So someone gave Carlos the green light, and he peels out basically into Albon. And Albon slams his brakes. Great work by Alex to avoid that. Carlos avoids him. They were inches from the McLaren mechanic in the pit box in front of him. And I saw that, and it was rough. It was very scary.
Yeah, no, agree. And the other thing was that I don't know them. I'd love to talk to Paul about this to find out what the kind of the hierarchy is in the pit crew. But when they all back away from the car and Carlos is supposed to go the first time, something happens. He doesn't quite pull away, and then there was a view from behind the jack man where you can see Albon coming down the pit lane, and the front jack guy half goes back in front again as if he's going to stop and go, well, you can't go. There's a car coming, but then doesn't have the courage and convictions and goes, it'll be all right, and just kind of moves away again. And then Carlo just screams out. I'm like, was it his responsibility? If he saw the car coming, was he supposed to just go in and re-engage the front jack and go, no, I know the light might be green, but car's coming. I don't know whose job it is, but someone screwed up there big style.
And it was, I was scared when you saw the replay of how close they were to the McLaren mechanic. Because, it's one thing when you're in a car and you have an accident, the cell has been built to protect you. But when you're just a dude standing out there, that's bad news. Anyway,
and then they didn't even communicate the penalty at first to Carlos. Right? It sounded like they told him it was a stop go, and it's
they did. They did say stop go penalty, and he goes stop go. Why would it be? And they go, yeah, I'm sorry, we're wrong on that too. And I'm like, oh my god, the Keystone cops can't shoot straight. We saw a little bit of action. We saw Mick spinning, and everyone instantly assumes that he's lost it, but he hadn't. He'd been tagged by Joe, so they came both in for pit stops. We saw Sainz smashing through the field trying to catch up, and then we had a bizarre kind of few laps where it all went a little bit quiet, and the biggest news we got was that Ted was changing his batteries and he didn't. They asked him a question and it all went silent for about 30 seconds, and he came back on and said, I'm sorry, did you ask me a question? I've just been changing my batteries, and went off down this little rabbit hole of describing his battery change for what felt like it got a little bit of a lull, right? We saw the Gasly parents annoyed. Lap 35, Ted came on and made the mistake again where he said it was a McLaren. Or he said it was an Alpine sandwich, but it was really a McLaren sandwich because you had Fernando, Lando, Danny, and then Esteban. And then Daniel Ricciardo was in trouble, kind of getting eaten up by Esteban. We had K-Mag and Latifi bumping each other, which knocked K-Mag out on lap 39. And then it gets crazy again, right? Because Ferrari gets on... This is
where I'm going to get really angry now, Brian, but come on.
Well, Ferrari gets on the radio, and I actually retweeted someone who had a great meme on this about all the different plans that Ferrari uses. Plan D. All right, so they went on lap 40, they went to plan D. But here's where it gets crazy, right? So Carlos said, we should pit. He's like, now is the time to pit on lap 40. And they said, stay out. And so you think they're going to finish the race on these tires, which are coming apart a little bit, but you're going for it. 10 laps or so left. You're going to finish the race. You're in great shape. And then he makes a great move on Checo.
Oh, awesome move.
Awesome move. And in the middle of the move, and again, I recognize the TV, the team radio isn't instantaneous, but it's not that delayed. They get on the radio during his move, at the very least, it's the beginning of his move, on Checo, and tell him to box. So it took him 2 laps to be completely indifferent to the strategy they were going to take. No decision. He says pit, they say stay out. Now they come back, let's come in. But we're going to tell you this at the most critical juncture of your race, and you move into 3rd place, and then they still tell him to box.
It was just so I'm angry about it now again. It's like, why? If you're getting held up by Perez and you're not quite putting the move on him, pit now, put softs on because you've only got 10 laps left, and just be like a rocket ship for the last 10. Or see if you can get past him and then see if you could eke out 5 seconds on him and serve the penalty at the end of the race. No, let's do neither. Let's waste 2 or 3 laps. Let's burn the tyres off more. Let's finally let Carlo pass Perez. And the moment he's passed, let's not build up any kind of gap. Let's just immediately pit, hand everything back, and give him 10 laps to chase down 21 seconds to get back where he was.
Unbelievable.
Just insane. Now, there was a school of thought. I'm going to give my friend Az that was on DRS a shout out. He was kind of saying, well, if he'd have stayed where he was, he probably wouldn't have had the pace in those tyres towards the end, so he would have probably lost 2 places with the 5-second penalty. By pitting and charging back through, he only lost 1 place, but got the fastest lap bonus point, so it's a good call by Ferrari.
Should have made it earlier then. If that's the call, they should have made it earlier.
I'm thinking that's a captain hindsight call, that in hindsight you can say it worked out like that. I massively don't think that's what's going through Ferrari's head at the time. I just think that it's like... They just turn around to the people in on the pit wall and say to the strategists at Ferrari, hey, what we're going to do now? And it's just Pinky in the brain back there. It's just kind of like, it's just, I don't know. It's just...
Well, but have a plan. I mean, you have 26 plans, 1 for each letter of the friggin' alphabet. And if you're going to stay out, stay out. If you're going to pit for new tires at some point, pit before you get this far into the race with 10 laps left. It's a 30-plus second loss for the pit. Do it earlier. The whole world bagged on Haas for pitting lap 9. And the same thing for Ferrari with 10 laps to go. Bring them in earlier and get them out if you're going to do that. But don't go back and forth and have a debate like this. Have a friggin' plan and stick to it, man.
I know. And then that kind of saw that really, other than Sainz, kind of he quickly cut through, but then he was never going to catch Alonso with the big seconds. The other story that suddenly developed was, hang on a minute, Max is dropping Lewis because the Merc can't stay with the Red Bull. So surely Checo is therefore dropping George because the Merc can't stay with the Red Bull. But no. 2 different drivers in the same machinery, and suddenly George is on a rampage going after...
Yeah, but 2 different drivers in both sets of machinery. So.
True, but I was very, very surprised to see the ease with which Max was pulling out on Lewis, yet Checo had no answer to George whatsoever. I thought, to me, that was the biggest sort of shining a spotlight on Checo. Just is missing something in that overall ability to make him...
The whole weekend he was off. He was bad in practice. He had a decent little quali in Q3 in particular, and he just wasn't great in the race. He started slow, and he was just kind of hanging out there. I don't really know. And then what really boggles my mind was, first of all, George thinks he's passed him. They make contact. This is a British term. Whinging? Was he whinging? Do I have that
whinging.
Right?
Yeah, he was whinging. Because, was George right by the letter of the law? By the new regulations, I think they've said that if you're on the inside of a corner, if your front wheel is level with the rear wheel of the car in front, then you're deemed to be whatever their new regs are, right? Okay, fine. But I think we need a little bit of context here, George. If the way that you've got that wheel level is by throwing it up the inside from miles away, where you shouldn't have been there, coming in at Mach 10, where there's no chance you're going to be able to brake, so the other guy has to bail and leave the track, I'm not sure that counts as alongside. I thought they were pretty generous when they just said racing incident.
I agree.
Because
it reminds me of like if you had two boxers in the ring punching each other in the face, and one of them said, hold on, according to sporting regulations 32, your glove is not laced the correct way. Just race, just box, just fight. You're doing it. Stop worrying about it. And Toto had to get on twice and tell him to zip it.
But he recovered, George. I mean...
Well, hold on. So
go on.
Go on. This was amazing, but there's like some rumors floating around here. So on the VSC restart, amazing move by George to get past Checo, who was taking a siesta, apparently. And just from the restart, bang right past him. However, there's a little bit of stuff going around on Twitter post-race pretty quickly that there was 2 notifications about the VSC ending, and there may have been some confusion. So I don't know if that's accurate or not, but if it's not,
that smells like your initials to me.
If Checo was just sleeping, that was terrible.
I think that you've got to keep the delta, right? You have to keep if they were like 0.5 seconds apart, you have to kind of maintain the 0.5 seconds apart. When the VSC ends, you can't have made up ground. But what was genius by George, if nobody saw it, was the way that he decided to interpret this is if I completely back off, so I'm probably 3, 4, 5 seconds, well, maybe not that much, but basically I back off miles from Checo just as I think the VSC is ending. And then I floor it so that I can time it that just as VSC ends, I'm back to my 0.5 seconds behind, but he's basically going 20 miles an hour and I'm going like 90. I'm just going to breeze past him because he won't have a clue what's going on. And no, Checo was still kind of midway through ordering the which slush puppy he wanted with his takeout, and he didn't see him coming.
What's a slush puppy? Is that like a hush puppy but a slushy combined?
Yeah, it's maybe that. I thought it was an American thing that you guys shipped over to the UK, a slush puppy.
Slush puppy?
It's an ice drink.
I think you made a mistake.
No, hush puppy is a shoe.
It's also food.
Is it? A slush puppy is a like crushed ice with lots and lots of artificial flavoring.
Really?
With a little
slushy and like a Slurpee. Those are things at 7-Eleven.
Well, okay, I'm just saying, there's no way we came up with that because it's lots and lots of artificial colouring and ice, so that's very American. So I'm sure you forced it on us.
Please. What are you, Clarkson, making fun of Americans
Maybe
now?
it's something that you guys didn't want, and you were like, those idiot British will take this. If we just tell them it's American, they'll just take it. And we did. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So then the end of the race. The end of the race probably didn't get enough attention. It got some because of what happened. The Aston Martins were back at it. They got back together again as they started the race, and Lance was in front of Seb. And there's some context here that I didn't appreciate during the race because, they're finally showing things on the telecast. And they show...
Telecast? What, are you from the 1970s?
Yeah, black and white TV I got going here. They show Seb right up Lance's trumpet on the final corner, and Lance cuts inside, and it was... I don't know if he brake checked him or slowed down or if he just had no pace, but Seb had to get out of the throttle. And Lance finishes ahead of Seb, and it was saucy at the end. But, hold on. If one of the things that is important to note is, do you know where Lance finished? So what position that was for?
It was for 10th. It was the last
10th.
point, wasn't
it was I didn't know it was the last point. I did not know they were fighting for the last point like that.
They didn't give any coverage to the fact that for the first time in forever, both Astons were both A, finishing, and B, finishing like fighting
near
for a
points.
point.
Right.
Because they've been at the back with Williams for like what feels like forever. But
And Alpine had a double point finish.
Yeah. Yes, they did.
And actually, so did McLaren. Danny Rick was 9th. I just noticed that. So McLaren and Alpine, double points. Aston Martin, 1 in the points with Seb a millimeter behind.
But hang on a second. Hang on. We're talking about the end of the race when it finished. And for the first time ever, we'd already got Pit Lane Paul's report by this point.
Yeah, so anyway, we got the report before the race is done. It shows up in the Gmail. We're like, what? Let's hear what Paul had to say about an interesting Paul Ricard race.
Hi guys. So I don't really know where to go, what to say. The race hasn't finished yet. It's actually probably about 10 laps left, maybe 7 laps left. But I've got to rush to the airport, so I won't lie. Let's get this done now because I can't see a lot happening for the rest of this race for the simple reason that not a lot's happened since lap 1. I'd be particularly happy if we never come to this place again. A, because it's hard to get to. B, because, well, let's be fair, it's been a terrible race considering. France is the world's most popular tourist destination. I would like to think that the attendance here would drop significantly tourism-wise based on today. To give you some size of France, it's the largest European Union country. It was actually smaller than Texas. So yeah, woo to Texas. And just to give you some more French facts, they eat about 25,000 tons of snails each year. Remarkable. It's the speed that they move also. So it doesn't really surprise me. And they invented camouflage, the French army, so I'm told. Probably just weren't doing anything, so no one saw them. So we'll give them that. Turning a baguette upside down is unlucky. I imagine lots of baguettes were turned upside down at the start of this race because, mainly in the Ferrari garage, as they have done a Ferrari again, haven't they? I do not understand the strategy with Sainz. It makes no sense to me. I'm not a strategist by any... I just don't get it. I don't get Ferrari. I don't understand. French was once the official language of England. I would swear in French to describe my feelings towards the French Grand Prix. So what we got, probably 4 or 5 laps left. Verstappen's going to win. Lewis is going to be second. Perez arguably third, with Russell's chasing him down. Russell's just tried a crazy move at the inside, which was pretty embarrassing as he still claims it to be Perez's fault. Yeah, that's about it. Oh, see you in Budapest.
I love that little kind of sound of defeat at the end. Like, he's just literally hated every second of that race.
Well, I mean, everyone says it's incredibly hard to get to and from the track. Like, the traffic is a nightmare, and it's in the middle of nowhere, as he said. I mean, and it's not. It doesn't. The track doesn't cause good racing. Today we had interesting racing because of
circumstance.
Yeah.
I will not miss it. If it's true that it's not returning next year, I will not miss it. We beat up on it last week that we don't like it. It gives us headaches, and it's not a great racetrack. And we said, maybe the new regs can deliver us a race that will be absolutely awesome. And
nope.
Yeah, it didn't.
No, but we have to talk about fantasy. I got to be honest. I didn't even check my fantasy score until we started the podcast. Like right before we started, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know. It was like just not something I was interested in. But today, from Circuit Paul Ricard in the Dirty Side Fantasy League, the top 5 were, before we get back to Rob and myself, the top 5 were Eall S with Nutcracker Wannabes, 173 points. Nice job, Eall. That's really good. Avanish S, Team 1, 171 right behind. Cy M with Safe Bet. Kelly Marie S with Wingin' It. And Stephen U with Vroomstappen coming in 5th. So great job to everybody who finished in the top 5. Scores, though, highest 173. So as you could see, in most weeks we have, we're in the 200s. So obviously with some of the retirements, with some of the, mix up to the finishing order, it definitely didn't go the way anyone anticipated. I did beat you slightly. There's no gloating. It was just such a mess today.
Was it 126 to 123 or something? I think it was
134 to 130. It was.
It was not pretty. It was once Haas went up in smoke, once Leclerc disappeared, once I knew you had Max, but you had Ferrari and I had Red Bull. I knew that my Red Bull wouldn't be enough to cover your Max, so it was.
Yeah, I finished 17th, which is fine. I'm actually, I guess, happy with that. The downer is just a quick note, and our leader in the league is Andrew T with Alpha Taily, and Andrew coming out of Austria before this race today. I did a little analysis. Andrew was 27th in the world. The world.
Oh my gosh.
Out of 1.48 million people who play F1, Andrew T, if you're listening, 27th in the world before today. Now, he had a worse today than I did. So I caught up to him a little bit. And I don't know how to do this without sounding smug, Clarkson-esque. But I was 707 in the world before today, out of 1.48 million, which puts me in the 99.9522 percentile.
707, that's pretty rubbish though, isn't it, really? There's like 706 people in front of you. I mean, 20,
in the world.
20, whatever it was, 20-something is like amazing, but 700, I mean, you're just clutching at straws now.
In the world, but no
This is a
longer
big
after
number.
my debacle today.
I think we move on and forget about that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So now, we got another DRS this week. Caught up with an old school buddy of mine, Ben. It was great catching up with him, despite the fact that Brian, yet again, when anybody mentions the school system in the UK, decides to give them grief that they went to Hogwarts. But
no, you had like a fancy name. Listen,
it has a fancy name. So what? I mean, it's just like I'm just sensing some sort of jealousy here that you wish you'd gone to Hogwarts. But here we go. We will push through tonight, platform 9 3/4, and catch up with Ben.
Right, now it's my great pleasure to add yet another one from somebody in my background to the DRS, being as Brian is having monopoly over this.
Oh, come on.
So to keep the trend going, I would like to welcome my school buddy Ben to the dirty side of the track. Hello, Ben.
Hi, nice to be here.
Well, it's nice to meet you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So the real question I have before we get into your Formula One passion, experience, background is why are you friends with Rob?
I suppose circumstance more than anything, to be honest. we met when we were at school, so 10 years old. A school called St Edwin's Middle School in a town called Evesham, which is on Rob's hometown. And then we went on to Prince Henry's High School through from 13 to 18 to the same school together. I used to sit next to Rob in French.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. Mais oui. Was that when we had was that Mr. Swin or was it Mr.
Mr. Swin? That's
Mr.
right.
Swin, yeah.
Shout out, Mr. Swin. We'll be tagging you in this episode.
Well, I'm not sure if you might even still be alive.
Okay.
Did the Pet Shop Boys ever make it across to the US, Brian? Have you ever heard of the Pet Shop Boys?
Okay. Vaguely, so
they had a song. They had a song called "It's a Win," and we used to mess around at the back of the class, and we used to sing to that theme was Mr. Swin. So yeah. That's why me and Ben are both fluent in French, because we just messed around doing that instead.
In fact, I can remember as well that you gave me, this came up the other day because we were watching Stranger Things, and you know, like the Kate Bush thing's big at the moment, and I can remember you gave me this tape once, and it had Abbey Road by the Beatles was on 3/4 of it, and then at the end there was just these 5 or 6 random
Kate Bush
songs. So.
And Wuthering Heights, man, it's a classic.
It was Wuthering Heights, yeah, and I'm sure that one was on there as well. So, it's all come back round again. Only before your time.
Well, this is okay. All right, transitioning as best I can. Let's talk about F1 a little bit. I know I'm happy you guys became friends at Hogwarts or wherever you went to school, but Ben, you were sharing with us a little bit before. A little bit about F1 and when you got into it and who you liked and enjoyed watching. Could you share that with the listeners? Because I thought it was really fascinating.
Yeah, so I guess, like as I was mentioning before, there's never a time when I suddenly remember getting into Formula One. It's been one of those things that I sort of always remember watching. But I suppose some of my first memories of that whole sort of PK, Lauda, Prost, Senna era, that's when I really start remembering really sort of having an interest in it. And I suppose that sort of came to a head around that era was when first Prost and Senna were in the same team at McLaren, right? And I think it was at Suzuka where Senna had sort of qualified. Well, Suzuka is one of the interesting ones for your podcast, actually, because Suzuka, you qualify, if you come first in pole, you start on the dirty side of the track, right? So it's one of these circuits where being in pole isn't necessarily an advantage. And anyway, Prost got off the head and just stayed in front of him, and Senna couldn't get past. And eventually he sent one up the inside, and they had a crash and a coming together. And then that sort of rolled over to the next season where Prost had then moved on to Ferrari by that point, and it was the second from last race of the season. And Senna was, I think, 9 points ahead in the World Championship, and basically the same thing happened again. Senna qualified first, Prost got off to a better start, and Senna just didn't back out, and they basically just drove into him in the first corner, and then just got out of his car and he won the World Championship because Prost could no longer mathematically. And that really stands out as one of those moments in sport, And I can remember thinking, I think I quite like this. This sport has quite got some entertaining factors to it,
Oh, for sure. I think there'll be a lot of new fans who got onto the Drive to Survive thing who may have seen last year's Abu Dhabi race for the first time. And I'm sure they're probably walking away thinking, oh, you remember that crazy way to win the championship? And, years from now, they'll still remember that. So, yeah, those moments are great. And by the way, note for Rob, we should definitely sponsor a track where they start the grid, the pole position on the dirty side of the track. We should. I got at least $10. I got $10. Can I slap a sticker on the wall? Is the best we'll be able to do.
There are a few others on there. They don't spring to mind, but they do every now and again. You'll hear one of the commentators say, "Of course, maybe you want to qualify in second in this track." And it's a bit odd. I always think that they don't just stagger the grid the other way around.
So I've got it. Okay, we can't afford to sponsor it, but we find out what the next one is. We do our homework now that Ben set us the challenge, and whatever that next race is, then we have to do some artwork for the during the week that we can drop on social for pole position. Brought to you by the dirty side of the track, not sponsored. We're not going to put any money into it.
Yeah. And also we can maybe get Pit Lane Paul a sticker, and he can just slap it on one of the walls on the pit straight, even if it's for a second. And then we can have him take a picture of that. I don't know, but I love it. So, I guess I have a question for you. Since you're an F1 fan, and you have these great memories of watching amazing races, do you feel your nerves are steeled for 100 seconds of DRS? Do you feel ready for this chaos that's about to come your way?
There's certainly a sense of heightened anticipation in the air. On this side of the Atlantic, I mean, I've heard the segment, so I sort of know what to expect. But still, I wonder whether you're going to throw any curveballs in there for me.
It's like 807 degrees for you today, so maybe we'll kind of go down the path we've done in the past, or maybe not. I don't know. See if you're on your toes in that heat. So I will be administering the questions for you, Ben, because to have Rob do it would be unfair. You guys go back so far. It would be too easy. So are you ready, Ben?
I'm ready.
I'm ready as well. Rob, are you ready to time us?
I have the timer ready and loaded, so I will count you guys in, and away we will go. In 3, 2, 1, go.
Who's your favorite F1 driver today?
Norris.
Who do you think is the best F1 driver today?
Do you know what I'm going to say Norris or Russell, one of the two.
Oh, of the British drivers I see. Okay. GIF or GIF, how do you pronounce it?
I'd say GIF, but I know I'm probably wrong.
No, you're 100% correct. That's accurate. What is your favorite meal?
Roast beef and Yorkshire pudding.
Yes.
With
All right, that's not. But what's my favorite meal?
I'd say macaroni cheese.
That is not correct, but it's a good guess. What's the best racing movie of all time?
Is it Rush, the one with Thor in it?
Yes, yeah, it is. That is correct. Yeah, the Ron Howard Rush. That is a great movie. What's your favorite F1 track?
Spa.
Yeah, agreed. 1,000,000%. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
And do you have a favorite musician or musical group?
Not really, no.
All right, then. Well, that's a good answer, I guess. A favorite non-motorsport sport?
I'd say rugby.
Okay, do you sleep in or do you get up early?
I have to get up early because I have a bad back, so when I wake up, I have to get out of bed.
Do you have any lucky superstitions?
No.
And what's the best thing for you to do on a rainy day?
Stay in, I would say. It rains a lot in the UK, so you get quite used to it, yeah.
DRS on race cars today. Good thing or bad thing?
Good.
And you're done.
Oh, what? I had 10 more lined up to do that. I wanted
you might
to
have done, but you can't ask them all. You just get the 100 seconds, Brian. That's kind of how the feature works.
So, GIF, you're correct. As you may have heard, that's the one that I'm really kind of passionate about, and everyone tells me I'm wrong. And apparently, you've felt the same. You're an oppressed GIFer, and I understand that. And we should stand up and be proud because the first word is graphics in that acronym. So,
yeah, well, people keep telling me that the person who came up with it says it's pronounced differently, and I just think, well, they're probably wrong then.
Or someone got to the woman who invented it and they told her to say it was Jif or Guy or whoever. They said, say it's Jif for some unknown. Maybe even the peanut butter company got to them. Who knows? I mean,
it could be one of those, like one of the world's practical jokes, couldn't it? You know?
Yeah.
Start a rumor, You know?
The other one I want to pick up on is because we were discussing this was so favourite track is Spa, and one that is under the potential hammer of not appearing next year. So
Yeah, I mean, you never know how much of this is a bit of sort of theatre, do you? Really, with these, because we heard that with Monaco, didn't we? And then they sign a really long contract. But for me, I mean, it's Eau Rouge makes Spa. I think that corner has got a lot of sort of theatre to it. If they ever re-engineered it, I think the track would be a lot more boring. But I don't know whether any of you play any of the sort of F1 sim games, but that's a brilliant track to do on that. I mean, I'm not particularly good at the games myself, but you know, it's got a real nice sort of flow to it. And in the interview you had with Villeneuve last week, he was sort of talking about it being akin to sort of downhill, a bit like downhill skiing.
Yeah,
that and Suzuka, I think, and you can sort of feel it if you're on those sims. You don't get that sort of full sensation, but it's got a lot of changes in sort of height as well, which I don't think you always appreciate when you see it on TV. And I think, yeah, just for me, it's quite an interesting circuit.
I love all of it, even the things that people don't like. Like someone once told me they don't like the bus stop chicane. I love the bus stop chicane as the kind of the last thing before you come onto the straight. In qualifying, you watch people come out of there and like, are they going to get on the throttle fast enough? What will their time be? You can see the start finish line. I mean, the whole track is brilliant. And so if that goes away, I will need copious amounts of alcohol.
Well, it's got two different straights as well, hasn't it? Because it's got the straight that comes straight out of Eau Rouge, and there's a lot of overtakes there because it all depends on the sort of line they've taken through and the exit speed. So you can see cars really sort of like coming up, and then there's a chicane at the end of that straight as well. So I just think it's got a lot going for it.
Really. Yeah, I mean, and what also had a lot going for it was your shout out to our Villeneuve interview for last week. So nice little plug there. So thanks for that.
Well, do you know what? I thought that was one of the best Villeneuve interviews I've heard this year.
That's going to become the soundbite for this week's episode. Also, just to pick you up on one other thing. So we learnt the sad news as we were just catching up with you before we started recording that your band is no longer a thing. But you are a musician, because what I was going to ask you, I was mentioning to Brian that we've got my brother did the intro music, my neighbour did the DRS music, but what we don't have is a Sapstat jingle. So I was going to kind of throw the challenge down to any musicians listening, but really starting with you, but maybe it's an excuse to get the band back together, is I think we need a Sapstat jingle for Brian.
Well, no, we can give it a go. I'll speak to the band and I'll say, look, guys, you know, there's another opportunity for
big money opportunity as well. Yeah,
capture some of the glory days.
That's a great call out. Yes, Ben. In addition to Ben and the rest of the Bens, whatever the name of the band is. What's the name of your band?
Payback.
Okay. Well, so in addition to that, anyone else who would want to give it a shot, feel free to email us what you have, dirtysideofthetrack@gmail.com. And as we always do, if you want to take the 100 seconds of DRS challenge and ace it as Ben just did, feel free to reach out to us either at the Gmail I just mentioned or on Twitter at F1DirtySide. And Ben, man, it's been amazing. And it's great to meet you. And you know, there's an expression that you can be judged by the company you keep. And everyone I've met of Rob's friends are amazing. So the expression is clearly wrong, because then there's Rob. But I would just say thank you, Ben, for doing this. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ben. It was great catching up. And actually, and like I say, for those listening, they're not going to appreciate this, but that beard is fantastic.
Thank you very much.
That was awesome, Ben. Thanks so much again. Now let's look quickly at the next race in Hungary in a week's time. So the first GP in Hungary at this track was 1986. You'll do 70 laps because it's only a 4.38 kilometer circuit. Fastest lap of all time is 1 minute 16 seconds, 0.627 from Lewis in 2020. It does not have a lot of straights. So it has a pit straight, which they elongated in 2003. But even before that, a lot of people would compare it to a karting circuit. So what's interesting, so for people preparing their teams for next week, and just, you know, with all of the corners that are strung together, a lot of teams bring really high downforce packages. So it's not that fast in the straight line thing, which may disadvantage Red Bull a tiny bit, but it'll be interesting to see.
Well, I'm simmering here, Brian, because series of corners which would absolutely play into Ferrari's hands, and I'm just sitting here wondering how they're going to completely Ferrari it up next week, because it really should be a gimme for not a gimme, but even today, as we saw, the two sectors that had got the slower corners, Ferrari completely dominate, and Red Bull come into their own with the straight line speed. And this will not be about straight line speed next week, but I'm just going to spend a week wondering about how they're going to screw it up again. But
well, a couple last notes on the Hungaroring and outside Budapest is that there's one DRS detection point, but 2 zones. However, for all of our benefit, the pit straight is the best one, as there's a short burst of DRS again after turn 1, which doesn't do a lot. And I have some stats, Rob. Can I hit some stats on the Hungaroring? SAP Stats Hungary Preview Edition. All right. In 2003, as I said, they extended the pit straight. The winner that year in the newly modified track, Fernando Alonso, which is sort of amazing. Last year, if you remember right, Esteban won. It was his first win ever, still his only win in F1 after Valtteri kind of went bowling in the wet, hit Lando, and then all heck broke loose. Do you know who had the fastest lap last year, Rob?
No, because I've scrolled past the notes and I'm not going to scroll back up again now. So I'm going to be honest.
Gasly! So the most wins ever in Budapest, 8 for Lewis. 8, that's a ton. The next most ever is Michael Schumacher at 4. As I said, though, they only raced at this track since '86. So Michael at 4. The other drivers who are currently driving who have wins there, Seb 2, Fernando 1, Daniel 1, and Esteban 1. And I'll get ahead of the story, Max has 0. And as we already said, this is not a straight line speed favoring course. So it'll be interesting to see what Max can do getting off, as we'd say in America, off the schneid at the Hungaroring. And from the grid position, which is going to be important because I have 2 more stats. First place, so pole position, has converted to win 16 times. Second place, 6 times. Third place, 8 times. So if you cumulatively look at the first 3 starting grid spots, 84% of the time the winner comes in the first 3. Yeah, that's a lot. So you're going to really want to have a good quali. There's only been a handful of people finishing first starting out of the top 3. 4th position 3 times, 8th once, which was Esteban, as I already said last year, in that kind of chaotic first turn even, and then 12th and 14th. So for all the hate we gave Paul Ricard, for all of the hate, the average overtakes since 2017 per circuit, Paul Ricard is the second most, only behind Sao Paulo.
Way. I saw this, and there's not a chance. And even if there is,
at F1 Stats Guru, if you're
rubbish.
wrong.
They're all rubbish overtakes then.
Well, hold on. I hate to say this. Budapest is 6th. Monaco has the least, which you would expect. Australia has the second least with their 2035 contract.
Yeah, but look at that graph, right, where you've got Montreal is just edging over. If I squint, it's probably 22, 23 overtakes, right? And allegedly, Paul Ricard is twice as good as Montreal. Well, I'm sorry, but you can shove that up your where, right? Because I would much rather go and watch Montreal on repeat over and over again than watch the French Grand Prix.
Well, the good news is we don't have to watch the French Grand Prix anymore. But just to note, there's not a ton of overtakes in the last handful of years at Budapest. So just be prepared. We'll see what happens. But I think a good quali is going to be important. A good start's going to be important. And a good downforce package is going to be important.
So I've got one little stat to add into the end of SAP Stats.
Yeah.
So although Lewis is the driver that's won the most here, I can't say the US phrase because it hurts my ears to say it. I'm going to say it. So Lewis is apparently the winningest driver. No, I can't say it.
Winningest.
Winningest. Yeah. That's not a word. It just isn't a word. Anyway.
You take winning and you add est to the end.
Yeah,
winningest.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Anyway, despite the fact he's Budapest, did you know, because he hit his 300th Grand Prix today, right? No driver in the history of F1 has broken the 300 barrier and gone on to win another race ever. So Schumacher, Lauda, Mansell, I think, and there's only like 5 or 6 drivers that have made the 300 race barrier, but every single one of them has never ever gone on to win anything beyond their 300th race.
That is a fantastic stat. I did see that, and I really hope at some point Lewis breaks it, and to bring maybe a little bit of a nice return to the beginning as we close the episode for Centurion Lewis. I hope that happens. And go out and follow him on Twitter, cheer him on in his battle. I enjoyed the race. The chaos, it made me angry, but it was at least something to watch. I don't enjoy the track. I don't want to go back. If you have not read our blog, please do, because we do a little bit of analysis on what might be falling off the calendar next year, and I'm pretty sure Paul Ricard's up there, but I am still nervous about Spa, and you'll see why if you check our blog, www.dirtysideofthetrack.com. Click on blog. So, Rob, bring us home, man.
Yeah, I would just, as per the DRS section, one final call out for all of the budding musicians out there. You've heard Brian play a couple of Sap Stats jingles today, which is just the F1 theme music, and he deserves better. The stats this guy comes up with are stellar. These are the stats that come up with a guy that is 725th in the universe in fantasy.
707.
707, whatever it is. I'm building you up here, don't interrupt. He deserves better. He deserves a jingle. So as you heard, Ben is going to try and get the band back together to come up with a Sapstat jingle, but if anyone out there can come up with something, we will happily cycle them through each week and then see if anyone's got a favourite. But if you are a musician, and even if you're not, because that might be funnier,
I mean, I could get my kids to play a recorder. I mean, we don't want that, though, do we?
Anything. No, if you can play the triangle. Anyway, we're digressing now. So we're back to back. We will be back next week for a Budapest review and hopefully the first airing of the very first listener-provided Sapstats jingle. So keep it on the dirty side and we'll catch you next week.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.